welcome to DNA. Today our special guest is Greg Henkel, and we are going to talk about a very exciting topic. What it's like to travel around the world. I'm super excited because traveling around the world has been a dream since I was a kid. Was it your dream when you were a kid?
I don't think so.
Okay, but you did it. The point is you did it. So like it has been my dream, but I've never been able to do it because I need to work, there's like money problems, visa problems. So I was super impressed and curious when I saw Greg actually traveled around the world for 11 years. So today I'm super excited to hear Greg's story. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me.
To tell you guys the truth, I found out that Greg traveling around the world LinkedIn. And there is this website, you can look up people's profile, and usually you see boring stuff, working at this company for 4 years, working at that company for 2 years. But on Greg's LinkedIn, there is an experience about being a world traveler for 11 years. And here's what he said. He said, I visited 70 countries. 70 countries. Sailing around the world twice. Teaching English to monks, which we definitely have to talk about what that means. And traveling the whole Eurasian continent by public transportation and crossing Spain on foot.
Yeah, that's right.
All that are true. And he did it in 11 years, and here he is. As a start, tell us what prompted that decision to travel around the world? Especially it was never a dream since you were a kid.
I think at a really just the most basic level, it was just curiosity. I like learning about other cultures. I like visiting, new places.
How did you decide, okay, now is the time I'm gonna start traveling around the world?
So it's kind of a funny story. When I was at university, one of my friends, one day I just ran into her randomly and she said, oh, did you hear that they're doing this kind of exchange program in London? I think you should go. And I kind of said, what? But yeah, I went, and in the end I chose to do the program, so I lived in London.
So that was your start of the world traveling experience.
Yeah.
What were you doing in London for the exchange program?
Oh, it was just some kind of like British life and culture themed program. So I had like a Shakespeare class. And
starting from there, how did you start traveling around the 17 countries?
So once I kind of started, oh wow, it's really interesting. There's kind of a whole new world out there. Well, actually, when I came back from London, I changed my major. I was a math student before. Oh. And I changed
math to literature.
Oh, I changed to history.
Okay.
And because I just realized I didn't actually know what was. I was so surprised about everything I was learning. It was like, oh, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is. So I started taking these classes to learn more about the context behind things in the newspaper. And by the end of university, I kind of just really wanted to travel more and to keep learning.
Gotcha.
So I got a job teaching English in Japan. And
that job is to teach English to monks?
No, to teach exactly the opposite of monks, high school kids.
Oh, okay. All right, but where did you start to do English to monks? How did that happen?
There's a lot of stories in between. I was in Laos. And in the capital city, I don't think there's a lot of jobs. One of the only jobs when I was there, this is like almost 20 years ago, was working in tourism. And a lot of the young people, they wanted to learn English so they could get a job as a tour guide. And the best way to do that was actually, I think, through like the Buddhist temples for whatever reason. All the monks, they're very, they're wearing like traditional monk outfits. I guess kind of like the orange cloth. Yeah. And it's funny because normally you would kind of think a monk is kind of like a very serious person
who
maybe doesn't speak, very focused. But there are all these maybe like 18-year-old guys who just wanted to chit-chat and practice their English with me. And I thought, oh, this is really, this is kind of weird. I guess a monk in Laos is kind of like, as a tourist, this is kind of like an exotic thing to see. And I think it was the opposite for them. It's like, oh, an American tourist how exotic. So let me go talk to him. So anyways, one of the students like, oh, we have an English class every day for an hour, and they asked if I could come in. So I was there for like maybe a week.
How long did you teach English in Japan?
So I did it twice. So the first time I was there for 2 years in this really small village in the middle of the main island. And then after I got married, I had all these funny stories from living in Japan. And my wife thought, oh, wow, well, I kind of am curious. I'd like to go too. So after we got married, we moved back there for a year. And I taught English again.
Gotcha. So speaking of your wife, I know that you found this wonderful lady in your world travel experience, right? Tell us the story. I bet that is probably your most proud story. Your world travel.
If for no other reason, my travels served me for something, and I met my wife. I was kind of backpacking through Bolivia. And I became friends with some other travelers, and it was a couple going in the same direction, and we hung out, for maybe a couple weeks, and we were eventually parting ways. And I had decided to move to Buenos Aires. The woman said, oh, my brother lives in Buenos Aires, so if you ever visit there, you have to call him. He's a nice guy. He can, introduce you to his friends and help you out. And then sure enough, when I arrived, he had already sent me an email saying, my sister told me about you. Let's go meet for drinks. And he's my friend, and now he's my brother-in-law. So after I got married and we moved back to Japan and we lived in Kyoto for a year, we had this kind of really interesting experience. There's this NGO that organizes these world cruises called the Peace Boat. And the Peace Boat takes volunteer teachers. The concept of the Peace Boat is kind of just to educate people about what's going on in the world, not just tourism, to actually talk about social issues and human rights. They have a big anti-nuclear weapon campaign that they've been working on for decades.
I see.
And they really think language is very important to having kind of better understanding among cultures. My wife and I were teachers on this cruise ship that sailed around the world for 4 months.
Oh, okay.
And when we got back to Japan, we went on this kind of crazy trip where we decided we would go all the way to the end of Europe from Japan without taking any airplanes.
Gotcha. So basically you took 4 months with a cruise travel around the world. Was that 70 countries?
Maybe 20 or so.
20 or so, okay. And then you decided to cross the Eurasia by the public transportation.
Yeah. When we got to Europe, at the very end of this trip, this is something I'd wanted to do for a long time. It used to be kind of a religious pilgrimage. So people would if their child was sick, they would say a prayer and say, oh, if my child is okay, then I promise I'll do this walk to kind of thank God or whoever you were praying to. It's almost like a personal sacrifice to do this. So it's a way for you to showing how grateful you are. There's lots of different paths you can take. It's called the Camino de Santiago, and that just means the walk to Santiago. And each day they give you, when you start, a little map of the terrain, so you can kind of know how far you're going to walk, does it go uphill, does it go downhill, and a list of the different hostels in each city along the way.
So that helps you to plan on the way when you should stop and rest. How far is the entire walk and how long does it take?
I want to say it's around 800 kilometers, and you can do it, they recommend doing it over 30 days.
Wow, a month.
Yeah, so you need to walk 25 kilometers a day.
Wow, that's a lot of walking.
It's a lot of walking, but it's really
very
nice.
Good exercise.
It's good exercise. I like it for 2 reasons. I think it's really neat, especially now that people take subways and airplanes and cars. You kind of are disconnected from space and distances and how things are connected in actual the physical world. So it was really nice to get a sense of what does walking for 25 kilometers really mean, and you can see the gradual transition from one to another.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of the slow and taking it all in was really nice.
More slow pace, the time span of your life kind of become different. Living in New York, it's every minute, boom, 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 and now you're taking time to look around.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's nice
I
too.
should consider doing it. Sounds like you had a longer stop in Japan, but like shorter stops as a tourist, like around most of the countries.
Yeah.
Did you like spending more time in a city like you experienced in Japan, or do you like seeing stuff on your way like a tourist?
It's funny. I think when I was younger, I kind of liked the idea of just like almost like appetizers where you're trying lots of different things. But now I think it's funny. My wife, she has I think it's her father's cousin. He does this once a year. He's retired now, so he visits a country and he rents an apartment for 3 or 4 months. And just to get a sense of what it's like to actually live there and like kind of make friends and have kind of like the routine of normal life. And before he goes, he'll learn the language, he'll like read about the history and literature. He'll like spend 9 months at home studying and learning, and then 3 months going to the place. And then each year he chooses a different country.
Wow, how many countries has he been?
Maybe, I don't know, probably not as many as me, but I think his like depth of knowledge from being there is much greater. Actually, I like my wife's relatives' method better of maybe just like taking it slow and just like enjoying things. One of my really wise friends, he was backpacking around Europe, and he said at the hostel he recognized someone at the plaza from this hostel, and he kind of said, hey, what did you do today? And then the person said, oh, I was just sitting here having a coffee and just watching people. And my friend said, oh, that's kind of a waste. I went to 3 museums, I went to the palace, but my friend told me, he said, now years later, I realized that my friend was the wise one, because I don't even remember the museums, but I think my friend, like, just absorbing what day-to-day life is, that actually seems like a little bit more meaningful.
Any tips, advice for people who want to do a world travel?
Looking back on kind of my experience, so I graduated university and then just kind of left the United States for a long time. And I would do English teaching jobs. I went to film school and did kind of photography and video stuff. But in the back of my mind, I was always worried if I had to come back to the United States, if I was somehow going to have a hard time getting a job, or people would maybe think, oh, I'm irresponsible because I'm 35 years old when I came back to the United States, and all my work experience was pretty random. But in any case, when my wife and I decided to move back to the United States, it was just the opposite. People really valued my experience. And even in myself, it actually makes my job a lot easier now, having visited a lot of different countries. Now I'm talking to people who aren't from the United States. I can usually, maybe I visit their country, or I can ask them about it. It's easier for me to connect with foreigners.
Yeah, for sure. Having the courage and the ability to make the world trip happen is not easy at all. So
my advice, I guess, is if you're a little bit worried about these things, to not worry. I think everything kind of worked out.
Thank you again for joining us today, Greg. Your story is super, super interesting, and I'm gonna figure out a way to do my world travel, and I will ask you for your tips at the time.
I look forward to interviewing you in 11 years to ask you how it went.
Friends, if you have more questions, or if you're also a world traveler and want to share your experience, please leave your comments on our page and the channel. Let's do this tradition together. What it's like to travel around the world. DNA, get!